Picture a trapper coming off the line at dusk, high on the Wind River country, snow to his knees, wind sideways off the peaks. Somewhere in the last 2 miles, his feet stopped hurting. That's the part nobody warns you about. The pain doesn't get worse before frostbite takes you. It quits. He makes camp, gets a fire roaring, and does the thing every man in that outfit had been taught since he was a boy. Pulls off his boots and jams his feet as close to the flames as he can stand, because heat is heat and frozen is frozen, and fire fixes cold. By morning, his toes are black. 2 weeks later, so is the foot above them. The mountains didn't take that foot. The fire did. For 200 years, the story got told the other way. Men lost fingers, feet, whole limbs to the cold. Like the temperature itself walked up and reached into their boots. But the temperature didn't do that alone. A belief did. That frozen flesh needs heat. Fast. Any heat. Right now. Get it to a fire. Rub it. Beat the blood back into it. Whatever it takes. That belief is older than the fur trade, and it's still killing people in our own century, on solo backpacking trips that should have ended with a sore ankle instead of an amputation. Here's the twist, friend. What actually saves a frozen limb has a name. It's called controlled rewarming, and it's almost the exact opposite of everything the old fireside instinct tells a man to do. I'll walk you through the real method piece by piece, including the one decision point that decided, more than any other factor, whether a mountain man walked out of the high country on 2 feet or got carried out on a litter. Stay with me by choice, friend. This one might keep somebody you know alive. I'm Amos Walker. I've spent the better part of 30 winters above 9,000 feet, trapping, guiding, and later running search and rescue callouts into country that doesn't forgive a bad decision. I've carried men out with feet I couldn't save, and walked men out on feet that should never have made it, and the difference almost never came down to how cold it got. It came down to what somebody did in the first 20 minutes after the damage was already done. By the time we're through, you'll know how to tell true frostbite from the frost nip that scares you for nothing. You'll know the 3 things you must never do to a frozen hand or foot, no matter how badly instinct screams at you. You'll know the one decision that has to be made once, correctly, before anybody touches a fire or a kettle of water. And you'll know the mechanism, the one a French army surgeon wrote down almost 200 years ago and modern wilderness medicine later confirmed, behind why the old fireside cure was quietly, catastrophically wrong. Before we get into it, hit subscribe. Not for me. The old skills that keep a body whole in weather that wants to kill you don't get taught around a kitchen table anymore. And there's a whole shelf of them still coming. There are 6 pieces to doing this right. Miss the first 2, you waste time. Miss the third, you make the call that costs the limb. Miss the last one, and you can do everything else perfect and still lose the leg, because that last piece quietly got left out of frontier medicine for 150 years, and it's still catching people today. We build to it. Piece 1. Before you do anything, you have to know what you're looking at, because treating frost nip like frostbite wastes the window, and treating frostbite like frost nip costs the tissue. Frost nip is the early stage. Skin gone pale, cold, prickling or stinging, but still soft when you press it. It'll ache like a bruise as it warms. Annoying, not dangerous. Warm it against your own body, hands in the armpits, a bare foot against a partner's belly, and it recovers on its own inside 20 or 30 minutes. True frostbite is a different animal, and the tell is texture, not color. Press the skin. If it's stiff, waxy, and doesn't spring back. If it feels like pressing a candle instead of a forearm, ice has formed inside the tissue itself. In the worst cases, the whole toe or finger goes wood hard clear through and won't bend at the joint. That's frozen solid, not just cold. Here's the old-timers field test my own grandfather ran a trap line by. And pinch it gently between two fingers. Skin that's only cold pinches like skin. Skin that's frostbitten pinches like leather stretched over a stick. No give at all. The reason this matters isn't academic. Everything that happens next depends entirely on which side of that line you're standing on. Treat frost nip like an emergency, and you'll do unnecessary harm rushing a fix. Treat real frostbite like a minor chill, and you'll burn the only window you get. Here's how you do it today. Learn the pinch test on your own skin right now, in a warm room, so your hands know the difference between cold and frozen solid before you're standing in a whiteout trying to figure it out by headlamp. Reading the injury tells you what you're dealing with. It does not tell you what to do about it yet, because there's a decision that comes before any fire, any water, any first aid at all. And getting it backward is how a man loses a foot he could have kept. Piece 2, and this is where 200 years of bad instinct lives. 3 things nearly everybody's gut tells them to do to a frozen limb, and all 3 make it worse. Never rub it, not with your hands, and this is the one that surprises people. Never with snow. That rub it with snow line isn't a modern myth invented for a listicle. It's genuinely ancient frontier advice. And it survived because even the man who first wrote real medical observations on mass frostbite believed it too. Ice crystals have already formed inside the cells. Rubbing doesn't dissolve them. It drags them across the cell walls like broken glass, shredding tissue that might have recovered. Snow just adds abrasion on top. Never expose it to direct dry heat. A fire, a stove, a heating pad, a hot water bottle straight against skin. Frozen tissue has no working nerve feedback. It can't tell you it's burning until it already has. Backcountry rescue logs are full of frostbitten feet that came out of the mountains fine and were burned past saving on a wood stove during the drive home, because the numb foot pressed the metal and nobody felt it until the smell. And never, under any circumstances, thaw it if there's a real chance it'll freeze again before you reach shelter. That one rule outweighs almost everything else in this method, and we'll spend the next piece on why. The fair pushback is obvious. Doing nothing feels wrong. Standing over a partner's foot going white and stiff, choosing not to shove it at the fire, goes against every protective instinct a person has. But the instinct to act fast on a frozen limb is exactly the instinct that built 2 centuries of amputations. Fast isn't the goal. Right is the goal. Here's how you do it today. Tape a card inside your first aid kit with 3 words on it. No rub, no dry heat, no refreeze. That card out-argues your own panic faster than any lecture will. Those are the don'ts. But there's a decision buried inside that 3rd rule that's bigger than a rule. It's the single call that decided, more than anything else, who walked out of the mountains whole. That's next. Everything so far, an old trapper could have told you over coffee. This next piece is the one that actually separates the men who kept their legs from the men who didn't. And it's counterintuitive enough that even good, careful people get it backward under pressure. Piece 3. The rule mountain men lived or died by, whether they ever heard it stated outright. You can walk for miles on a foot that's still frozen. You can't walk 1 more mile on a foot you've thawed. Here's the mechanism. A frozen foot, grim as it sounds, is tissue in cold storage. Damaged, yes, but stable. And stable tissue tolerates the trauma of walking on it because there's no active cellular process happening to disrupt. The moment you thaw it, everything changes. Blood floods back into damaged vessels. Swelling begins immediately. New tissue is soft, raw, mechanically fragile, closer to a fresh burn than a bruise. And if that freshly thawed tissue freezes again before you're somewhere warm and safe, the ice crystals that reform are larger and more destructive than the first freeze ever was. Refreeze doesn't repeat the damage, it compounds it. So the decision, made once, deliberately, before anyone reaches for a match. Are you within reach of definitive shelter? Someplace warm, dry, and permanent, not another cold camp, where the limb can rewarm and stay warm? If yes, and only yes, you rewarm. If there's any real chance you'll be back out in the weather before you reach that shelter, you leave it frozen and get the person out. Frozen and stable beats thawed and doomed to refreeze every time. This was documented in blood nearly 200 years ago. During the retreat from Russia in the winter of 1812, the surgeon overseeing tens of thousands of frostbitten soldiers noticed something nobody expected. The men who crowded closest to the campfires to thaw their frozen feet, and hands came away with gangrene in case after case. The men who stayed frozen longer and warmed slowly later fared better. He'd discovered half the truth by accident. Heat applied too fast to a frozen limb was worse than the cold itself. He hadn't worked out the other half, because in a retreating army, there was rarely any safe, permanent shelter to protect a thawed limb in the first place. Every fire was temporary. Every thaw was followed by more frozen road ahead. That, as much as the fire itself, is likely what turned so much of that army's frostbite into gangrene. Here's how you do it today. Before you ever set foot in cold country, know your shelter situation cold? Pun intended. If you can't answer yes, warm and dry, and staying that way within the hour with total confidence, the answer is don't thaw it yet. Keep moving. Get out first. That one call, thaw or don't, is the hinge the whole outcome swings on. Get it right, and everything in the next piece works the way it's supposed to. Piece 4. You've made the call, you're at real shelter, and it's time to rewarm. Properly this time. Water, not fire. Warm, not hot. The target range modern wilderness medicine has settled on, tested by doctors who treat frostbite for a living, is right around 99 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Noticeably warm to the touch, nowhere near scalding. No thermometer? Dip your own uninjured hand or elbow in first. Comfortably warm, not hot enough to pull away from. Submerge the whole limb, full immersion, not a trickle poured over it. Hold that temperature for roughly 20 to 30 minutes, topping it up as it cools, until the tissue goes from stiff and waxy to soft and pliable, with color returning, often deep red or purple, sometimes mottled. That color change is a good sign. It means blood is finding its way back into vessels that were shut down. Here's the part nobody warns you about. It's going to hurt. Once feeling comes back into frozen tissue, the pain can be severe. Throbbing, burning, worse than the original cold ever felt. That pain isn't a sign something's going wrong. It's a sign the nerves are waking up, which means the tissue underneath still has a chance. Any team with real supplies starts ibuprofen right at this stage, not just for comfort, but because it helps hold on to blood flow at the cellular level while the tissue rewarms. The failure here, the one even careful people fall into, is stopping early. The moment the limb starts to hurt or looks an alarming shade of purple, the instinct is to pull it from the water. Don't. Both are expected. Pulling out early leaves the job half finished and half finished rewarming is its own kind of damage. Here's how you do it today. Add one item to your kit most people never think of. A simple metal stem cooking thermometer. Cheap, small, and it turns guess the water temperature into a number you can trust. Piece 5. And this is the piece the old fireside method skipped entirely, because in the old days, once the feet stopped hurting, the man figured he was done. He wasn't. Once tissue is rewarmed, it's at its most fragile point in the whole injury. Loosely wrap it. Clean, dry, non-stick dressing, with dry cloth between any affected fingers or toes. Elevate the limb above heart level if you can. It cuts the swelling that's about to set in hard. If blisters form, and on true frostbite they usually do, leave the big clear ones alone. Don't lance them. A blister roof is the only sterile covering that tissue has left. No walking on a rewarmed foot unless there's genuinely no other way out. Same math as piece 3, run in reverse. The tissue is soft, swollen, and mechanically weak now, and every step grinds cells that a day of rest would let recover. Old accounts from the fur trade describe exactly this mistake. A man's feet thaw fine back at the cabin, look survivable, and he's back on the trap line 3 days later because the beaver don't wait. And that's when the tissue that should have healed turns black and has to come off. Keep the limb warm afterward, but not hot. No tobacco, no alcohol, both of which mess with the blood vessels you're protecting, right when you need steady circulation the most. Not a temperance lecture, friend. Simple blood chemistry. Here's how you do it today. If you're the one doing the rewarming for someone else, your job doesn't end when the water does. Somebody has to keep that limb elevated, wrapped, and off the ground for days after. Plan for that before you plan for anything else. 5 pieces. Read it right. Don't rub it. Don't heat it fast. Make the one decision correctly. Rewarm it the right way. Protect it after. You could keep most people whole with those 5 alone. But 5 isn't 6. There's one more piece. The one that was quietly left out of nearly every frontier account of frostbite ever written down. The one that explains why Get Warm Fast became gospel in the first place, even though it was killing men the whole time. That's next. Pattern break. Everything up to here is technique. This last piece is the myth. Where it came from, why smart, careful mountain men believed it for 2 centuries, and why it's still out there right now, in outdoor forums and grandfather's advice, waiting to cost somebody a foot. Piece 6. The myth said, cold is the enemy, so heat. Any heat applied as fast as possible is the cure. It's intuitive. It matches everything a person's body tells them about being cold in every other situation. You're cold. You get near a fire. You feel better almost instantly. So when a foot goes numb and white, every fiber of frontier instinct says the fix is the same fix. Just faster, closer to the flame. Warm hands, warm feet. Warm the whole man through. That was the entire folk theory of cold injury for as long as there had been fires to sit by. And it's exactly backward. Here's the part that should stop you cold, so to speak. The surgeon who first documented it at scale, watching an army of nearly 500,000 men come apart in the Russian snow, saw the fire-thawed soldiers coming down with gangrene right in front of him. And even he didn't fully solve it. He wrote down half the truth. He saw rapid heat killing frozen limbs, and he still told his men to rub those same limbs with snow to slow the warming, because nobody yet understood what was happening at the level of an individual ice crystal inside a frostbitten cell. It took another century and better instruments before anyone could explain the mechanism. That the damage isn't caused by cold arriving, it's caused by heat arriving in the wrong order, at the wrong speed, on tissue about to face cold again. That's the whole tragedy in one sentence, friend. The fire got blamed less than the cold did, but the fire, used wrong, used fast, with no plan for what came after, is what turned survivable frostbite into amputation over and over for 200 years, in armies and hunting camps and trapping cabins alike. Nobody hid this from anybody. There was no company selling frozen feet, no lobby with a reason to bury the truth. It just took that long for anyone to have the tools to see what heat does to ice-damaged cells. Until then, the fastest, most human, most comforting instinct in the world, get warm now, was the thing quietly doing the killing. The mountains didn't take those limbs. The rush to fix the cold did. Here's how you do it today, and this is the whole method in one line. Never thaw a limb you can't guarantee will stay thawed. That single sentence would have saved more feet in more centuries than any bandage or salve or fire ever did. Here's the whole engine in one breath. Read the injury. Soft and cold as frost nip. Waxy and wood hard as frostbite. Never rub it. Never hit it with dry heat. Never let it refreeze once thawed. Make the one decision before you touch a fire or kettle. Are you truly done being cold? If not, stay frozen and get out. When you do rewarm, warm water, not hot, full immersion, 20 to 30 minutes, until it's soft and the color's back, and expect it to hurt like nothing else, because that pain means it's working. After the thaw, wrap it, elevate it, leave the blisters be, keep the weight off it, and underneath all of it, the one law that explains the rest. Heat isn't automatically mercy. Applied wrong, it's the very thing that turns a frozen foot into a lost one. This was never really about frostbite, friend. It was about the gap between what feels right in a crisis and what's actually right. Those two things line up more often than not. But when they don't, the instinct is what has to lose. That's a hard thing to ask of anybody standing over a partner's blackening foot in the snow. It's also the thing that keeps that foot attached. You don't need all 6 pieces tonight to walk away with something real. Do one thing. Learn that single sentence, never thaw what you can't keep thawed, and say it out loud once so it's in your voice, not just your memory. Somebody taught your grandfather the wrong version of this, friend, same as everybody else's grandfather. That's not on him. Now you know the right one. Tell me down in the comments. Did your family have a cold weather remedy passed down that you'd bet money is exactly backward, the way the fireside cure was? Snow on a burn, butter on frostbite, anything like that? The story with the most weight in the replies is the one I go deep on next. A skill that decided who walked out of the mountains whole and who didn't, forgotten for 200 years. You just took it back. Next time, the pack ice trick that let frontier hunters cross open water nobody else would touch, and the one signal that told them exactly when the ice would hold and when it wouldn't.